is. Now we're going to talk about how caffeine kind of helped to change society in the way that it stimulated people's thinking. So let's get to it. So as we know, caffeine, well, I don't know, but today we're going to know. Caffeine is the world's most commonly used psychoactive substance. And in fact, according to foodinsight.org, 93% of American adults report using caffeine, with 75% saying they use caffeine once a day, 25% 3 or more times a day. Caffeine is a naturally occurring substance found in many plants, part of a group of compounds called methylxanthines, all of which are central nervous system stimulants. So the central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. Basically, it's where everything is centered. So it stimulates that. Caffeine, when it comes to like smaller animals, what nature uses it for is actually toxic. So caffeine helps to protect plants from certain types of animals that would eat them, smaller animals that would eat them. But it also does things like studies have shown that caffeine helps to improve the memories of bees, to help them like find plants and locate different types of pollinating flowers and stuff like that. So it helps protect them and it helps them to reproduce. Now, in larger creatures such as ourselves, caffeine is not toxic. I mean, you'd have to take a lot of it for it to be toxic. But in us, the way it works is it's known as a potent antagonist of adenosine. And what adenosine is, it's one of the many chemicals basically that moderates sleep. So throughout the day, as we go about the day doing physical activity, as our circadian rhythm is going, adenosine and other chemicals are released that attach to our receptors that basically make us tired, that allow us to go to sleep, that make us drowsy. So what caffeine does is it blocks adenosine from being able to attach to those receptors. So it keeps us from getting more tired. It also is a stimulant, so it increases heart rate, blood pressure, stuff like that. And the natural way that we get rid of adenosine is when we sleep. That's why when you wake up in the morning, especially if you're tired, you drink coffee, it keeps you from getting more tired. So, the benefits why people do it is it improves concept formation, attention, it boosts mood, memory, reasoning, orientation, spatial reasoning, and improves reaction time, visual reaction time. Now, obviously, those benefits are more so for people who are tired, which again is what I'm talking about today, how caffeine is something that really helps to push and stimulate capitalism itself and just the way that the modern economy works and how it helped to change society. So just like anything else, and this is what drives some of that $107 billion in 2021 for the market, just like any other drug, the more that you use it, the more that you need, so I'm sure we all know a lot of people who drink multiple cups of coffee a day. So it's a very, again, I'm going into some of these numbers before I go into, just some of how it helped to change society. But, just like I said, the more caffeine you use, the more you need. It increases blood pressure and heart rate. It can cause jitters and anxiety, and it's been shown to basically mess up your sleeping patterns. Not necessarily giving you less sleep, but reducing the effectiveness of your sleep. So now let's get a little bit more into its impact on society, specifically how it helped to stimulate the golden age of Islam, the Industrial Revolution, age of reasoning in Europe, and why that's the case, how it spread and what have you. So it's caffeine's impact on society. Like I said, it helped to fuel the Enlightenment, the age of reason, Industrial Revolution, the golden age of Islam. All of these societal developments required thinking in much more focused and linear terms. Linear thinking is the systematic and analytical thought process that follows a known step-by-step progression similar to a straight line. I'll get into why that's very important in a sec. Specifically talking about people in Middle Eastern Europe. I mean, not Middle Eastern Europe, medieval Europe, in the Middle Ages in Europe. People drank water, but not necessarily very often. If people had access to clean water, they would drink it. But especially you're talking about peasants and just a lot of people back then, they didn't drink clean water often. So instead, they drank ale and hard cider because the fermentation process would basically kill the bacteria to make that more safe for them to drink. But Ale and hard cider is alcoholic, which means that since, you got people drinking ale and cider, including kids all day, you have a society of people who are drunk and buzzed all day long. Now, when you live in an economy that's mostly agrarian, and before the Industrial Revolution, 80% of the world's population were farmers, basically. When you live in an agrarian society, being drunk all day isn't that big of a deal in terms of, obviously they weren't like slop because they still had to work, but being drunk in an agrarian society isn't as big of a deal versus an industrial one, because industrial society, you have to operate, complex machinery. You have to, work night shifts, things like that. You have to think, again, more linear than just like getting something done in the field working. And again, like beer is high in calories. So people would drink beer while they worked in the fields because it would help give them the calories they needed so that they could have the energy they needed to do the work. So, like I said, and the water was not very good to drink, especially in medieval Europe around those times because of poor hygienic, environmental, scientific, and medicinal practices. So this also led, though, to, if people are drinking ale and hard cider all day in medieval Europe, a society of people who were more low energy, non-rational, non-linear in their thinking. Now, obviously, these types of things coincided with the bigger issues that were going on at the time. The general, in a feudal system, you know what I'm saying? The general mistreatment of people, the corruption, and the very, very rigid class structure that didn't allow people to advance or change anything, on top of people being drunk all day. So, as coffee, tea, and chocolate became more widespread in use, all of those things have caffeine in them. It became more widespread use in the 1600s, the mid 1600s. And I'm going to get into coffee's journey. The great rise of coffee houses for specific gathering purposes, music and poetry, stocks and bonds and finance, scientific gathering, and of course, political gatherings. So again, it's not just the coffee, the caffeine in the coffee itself, but it's how it brought people together and what people did when they came together, and how these things go hand in hand. And again, for industry and factories, that requires detailed, precise, and complicated usage of machinery, accounting and bookkeeping, factory and staff management, which you can't do with a society of people who are drinking ale and hard cider all day. But as society started to transition over to coffee, again, their thinking became a bit more linear as, other types of factors push for people to revolutionize the economy, society, politics, all of those things, which is much better done on caffeine, which is why to this day, the world runs on caffeine because it stimulates people. And again, in medieval society, as that transition happened, the way society operated and functioned changed as well, which again is why I'm talking about this today, because I thought it was really fascinating. So now we're going to get into the history in a sec. So let's see. So with the usage of coffee and caffeine, that allowed people to more easily break their attachment to the rise and fall of the sun, which is interesting to think about because before, lanterns and gas, people have been, having fires and lanterns and stuff for a long time. But work was more so tied to the rising and the falling of the sun. People would stop working, generally speaking, at nighttime, not just because it got dark, but because, you get tired at night. So caffeine helped to assist in the developments of things like night shifts, overnight shifts. Again, you're thinking, these people are literally, me, for instance, I drink 1 cup of coffee a day, but, a lot of people drink more. And especially, you're thinking like late 1800s, early 1900s, people who are operating these machines, and I'm not talking about the work conditions today, which were horrible, but people, operating these heavy machines, having to stay up, working 14, 15-hour shifts, people were gulping cups of coffee. So again, it's really fascinating to think about how closely tied the rise of sales and consumption in coffee around the world is like directly parallel to the rise of like capitalism and productivity and GDP rise and stuff like that, because it helped people do more. And obviously there's a lot of stimulants, there's not just caffeine. There's, now we have things like, harder things like cocaine and Adderall and Ritalin and really hard stuff like meth and stuff like that, but which were around really in the same time too. But obviously, coffee is a safer version of speed.